What's going on, everyone? Sid Gordon here with the Sidney Gordon podcast, powered by Core Medical Group. And guys, as you know, myself, Core Medical included, and its staff and its community have put a lot of effort behind child trafficking, sex trafficking, organ farming over the past 4 years. I spent a lot of time raising capital for it. As you guys know, most of you guys know, my daughter was almost kidnapped. I have seen quite a bit of things happen in the United States aggressively over the last 4 years. It's really ramped up, 2 years to be exact. And I've aligned myself with a few different companies, a few different foundations, and successfully narrowed it down now to one foundation that I'll be putting all my effort into. And the CEO, the president, Nicole Anderson, is here with me. Nicole, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Sid.
So before we get into the foundation, before we get into your goals, before we get in your long-term goals, I like to give the audience a briefing on childhood, where you came up, how you came up. The goal of this podcast is to show success stories. I barely talk about hormones on here, even though hormones do help provide success stories, right? If you have low testosterone, male or female, progesterone, you're dealing with things of all sorts. When your hormones are out of balance and then you balance those hormones, you become a lot more successful in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the, but I really love to talk about similar stories to myself. As most people know, my father committed suicide when I was younger, had a pretty hard outcome, and had a major success story, right? And I wouldn't take it back. So whatever you can do to inspire during your little briefing here, I'd be super grateful.
Well, I want to say that before the age of 10, my life was pretty normal. What normal children would go through on a daily basis with their parents. My parents weren't the wealthiest. They were blue-collar workers. My dad was a correctional officer. My mom was a nurse. We lived in a small town in Florida, and I grew up there. I grew up in church for many years. My mom she met her best friend at church, and her best friend and her were inseparable for many years. And then when I was 10, my life considerably changed. My mom's best friend's husband started grooming me. I know what grooming is now as being older and mature and gone through tons of therapy. Started grooming me. And then I started noticing other things that were happening within his home that I was uncomfortable with. And
you were spending quite a bit of time.
Yeah, we were. They had 2 children. They had twin boys, or a twin girl and boy, and so they were essentially our friends. My mom was best friends, so we spent Christmases together, family vacations, everything you can imagine. And at 10, I do remember telling my mom, I'm like, hey, he keeps touching my butt, and I don't like it. And it was like grazing, like we were out playing basketball. He would do like odd things that would grab me. And my mom says, okay, I'll take care of it. And then for a few months, everything was just fine. Like everything was normal. He didn't touch me. He didn't do anything. And then we were made to stay at his house. One evening, I wanted to go to my friend's house, but my mom made us stay there. And me and his daughter were sitting in a room. And I don't know how much you want me to say with this, but
you can get as deep as you want.
So we were playing Super Mario Brothers on Super Nintendo, and he came in his bathrobe, and he sat down and started masturbating next to us. She just didn't think anything of it. I was like, I was like, what's happening? Like, I hadn't ever seen that before. I'd never been a part of anything like that.
So it was abuse part of their yeah.
And so so from there it escalated for me, because I didn't say anything. He did tell me after that incident, he goes, well, your mom's not going to believe you a second time. And then it started getting worse where I would go over there in the afternoons because my parents worked 8 to 5, 9 to 5, and I was playing softball. And so it was easier for my mom to come pick me up there because we lived way outside of town. And so I would go there in the afternoons, and he would just happen to come home for lunch between 2 and 3 when I was at their house. And it escalated to massages. It escalated to, you're going to do this for me. If you say anything, if you do anything, you're going to wreck 2 families. And you don't want to do that to your mom. You know, she doesn't have a lot of friends.
Where's your dad at the time?
He's working. Then I think at that point he was switched to midnight, so it was even worse. He was sleeping during the day, and it slowly progressed. And I remember acting out, like where I would cry. I didn't want to go over there. I was begging not to go over there, but I just never said the words. I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. And then I remember it was probably, I was 12, I think. There was a day that it was at Christmas time because his wife and my mom went Christmas shopping. And I pitched a royal fit. Like, I cried and screamed. I was like, I don't want to be there. I don't want to stay there. I stood outside under their carport and I was begging. Like, don't make me stay here. Take me to my grandma's house. Take me to my grandma's house. I don't want to stay.
And your mother didn't ask why?
Nobody asked. And so I stayed outside for 18 hours behind a shed and sat there. I went in one time to go to the bathroom because
petrified.
Oh, yeah, petrified. I had to go to the bathroom, and I wasn't a person to pee outside. So I was like, I'm gonna go into the house.
I am.
I was not at that age. So I went inside, and when I went inside, he was on the couch masturbating with other children in the house, like other children sitting there. Wow. And I think the last, like, where I just could not take anymore was I was also in band. This is right before I went to summer camp. And I went to a youth camp. And right before that, I had a competition for band. And their house was right next to the high school. And we were getting back late at night, so my mom had arranged for his wife to pick me up from the high school. And when he picked me up, or when
she had to know what was going on.
She had to. Like, I still don't, whether it's denial or whatever, because I'm not the only victim.
It doesn't sound like it.
There was multiple victims.
Can me ask you something? You know, I've been indirectly involved with a lot of these horrific stories. It seems like for the pedophile or the sex offender, there's like a fucking there's like a playbook. There's like a fucking playbook for them because they seem to all know what the fuck to say to petrify the victim so that they get away with it. And I'll tell you something right now. For those of you out there, the reason why Nicole is sitting here right now is because most of them get the fuck away with it.
They do.
Like the majority. Because it's their word against the 9-year-olds. And now, with this right here, social media, they can blame it on, they saw it on their phone and they just don't like me, so they know that it's bad and they're going to put it in my direction. I'm hearing that a lot now. Yeah. Right? There's just, and the part for me that's crazy is like, you take a young girl, a vulnerable young girl who knows no better. Their parents are working their ass off probably, right? They're not developed mentally yet. And you say you're going to wreck 2 families. the last thing a kid wants to know the last thing I wanted to hear when I was young was my parents were getting a divorce. Like, that's like, oh shit. And back then, I don't know how old you are, but back when I was younger, divorce wasn't as common where I grew up in a blue collar area. It was like, oh my God, they're getting divorced.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
It was a big deal, right? So,
well, I will tell you exactly what he said happened. It wrecked 2 families. It did. My family was never the same, and his family was completely split up. And it did exactly that.
But, I mean, not your fault.
No. It took me many years not to wear that, right?
Yeah,
to wear that guilt. And 7 years ago, his son committed suicide. And
oof. Is he still alive?
Yeah.
It's all right. Hey, listen, I'm with you. You know, I think the hardest part about, you know, what we're going to talk about next, you know, is you have to act really professional after having information that really bothers you. You know, I sit here, Cole and I heard your story at the event, and I don't know if you noticed, but for some reason, we both ended up in the bathroom together. Like, he went in, and I didn't know he was in there, and then I went because I get very upset with stuff like this. And I've sat with major organizations that have done huge stings for sex trafficking, and you know, I'm watching these tapes being played, and it's 3 dudes on the other side of the table talking to 90% of the time, you know, a JJ's here too, sitting over here, but 90% of the time, a white American is the person paying for sex trafficking. It's most of the majority of men that are paying for sex trafficking. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? You know, and it's crazy because it's not like if it was like a Spanish dude, it'd be like publicized like crazy, but for some reason it's not, because it's a white American dude. And I'm obviously not playing like the race card there, but it's a fact. And you'll watch these
60% of abusers are white males.
You'll sit there and there'll be these people selling up the kids, and oh, don't worry, we have a doctor in the back. If you rip this 4-year-old from there, we'll just stitch him up for you. And then you have these men who happen to be former SF dudes that are sitting there cool as can be, just like, all right, cool, that's great, you know. And I'm sitting there going, you know, from a different room watching this happen, going, why aren't you killing this person right now, right? But through time, I've understood that, you know, you really have to be patient with that to get to the end result in order to really fix the issue. You know, those pawns right there, they're just getting more pawns, right? But in a situation like yours, it's a little bit different. It wasn't like mass trafficking. It was it sounds to me a lot visual. I don't know what
No, it was definitely very
okay
physical and very. I just don't want to go into that detail.
Okay.
Just because it opens wounds that I've healed, but
sure.
You know, the abuse was bad. It was like it was terrible, and no person should have to go through what myself and the other victims. But the aftermath was almost as terrible. I mean, I was 10 when this started. And for grown women to tell me and let me overhear that I was promiscuous, I must have done it. I must have been flaunting myself in front of him.
At 10.
At 10, 11, and 12. And
that's disgusting.
And for women to say that I was going to become a prostitute or a drug addict, or I was going to be pregnant by the time I was 16 because of this abuse, that they spoke these words over my life. I heard them. These were women I grew up with.
Oh, these are acquaintances. We'll call it. This isn't like a therapist.
No therapist.
Okay. What? So, can you tell us how it kind of came to? I mean, not to an end, but how the abuse for you how it stopped.
So, I went to,
because I think that's an important message. What I've gotten so far is, you know, teach your kids to be verbal.
Verbal,
right?
yes.
And you know, this day and age, you should know your kids well enough. If they say something that's out of the ordinary, you should probably get down to the bottom of it, you know. That's what I've caught so far, that just like you were on an island by yourself.
I was, and I felt alone. And I felt alone for many years, even after. The So at youth camp, my parents sent my brother and I to youth camp with our church. And it was up in Panama City Beach. And there was a preacher. His name was Josh McDowell. And he was talking about sex, was one of his topics, about premarital sex and what it does to you as a child, having sex early before marriage. Like it was ironic that was the conversation that he was talking about.
Well, I guess God exists.
Yeah. And then in that moment he said, you don't have to live with the burden. You don't have to live your life in secret. And I broke down. Like I cried for like 3 hours. My brother could not figure out what was going on.
Did your brother know what was going on inside that household? Because I'm assuming he was there as well too.
I don't believe to an extent that.
So it was the girls. It wasn't the boys.
It was the boys because of his son. But I'll just say that it's his story to tell.
Yeah. Okay.
And my brother was like, because I'm not an emotional person by nature. Like I just wasn't. I wasn't a crier. I wasn't a crybaby. I wasn't those things. Mm-hmm. And he could not understand what was happening. And he pulled the camp counselor over to me, and I told her. And she asked me who it was, and she already knew. She already knew who it was.
Who, the counselor? Because it was from the church.
Because it was from the church.
Oh my.
And we found out after this came out, they were actually counseling him on his sexual deviances.
The church was?
Yes. They were aware.
Oof.
These people, I was christened in this church. Mm. And these were also the same people who said the things about me.
Yeah.
And so from there, she had 3 days to report, and it just was a whole whirlwind.
How many other families reported the same thing? Were there? I'm sure there was multiple.
So we had 4 total that came forward.
Yeah, so there was 20.
He was charged with one single crime.
Okay.
Not multiple. Like if you write a bad check, you're charged with each check.
Yeah.
He was charged with one single crime because he was willing to plead guilty.
And
to save everybody the embarrassment of court.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And then, so we went through all that, and we went through the sentencing hearing where he could speak to us, and we could speak to him. I didn't say anything. I had nothing to say. I couldn't say anything. He said he was ready to be caught. It was time, and patronizing.
I mean, you kind of, after being charged with one crime, whether it was yours or not, it doesn't matter if you pled guilty to yours or not, it doesn't matter. And there was multiple. There really is nothing left to say. It's like, all right, you just gave him a get out of jail free card, legitimately. Like, what difference does it make what I say to him? He got a slap on the wrist.
He did. And 6 weeks later, we found out that the lead prosecutor on the case was arrested for sodomizing his son. And he was subsequently sentenced to life in prison, but was reduced to 20 years. And I think he's on his last leg of whatever he's serving.
It's wild. And
so, as I said, like, it runs deep.
Mm-hmm.
It runs deep. And real victims do not get the justice.
It's such an, it's like, listen, just because my generation, I'm 45 years old, right? Just because my generation didn't hear about it doesn't mean it wasn't happening, right? Now, it was happening probably just as much, maybe more, back then, and it has been happening for years. But now, it's becoming a lot more verbal in the open. And I think parents are, I think I've noticed that parents are very worried about their kids playing in the streets, getting kidnapped, this, that, and the other, which I don't believe that restriction is good for kids. I let my kids get hurt. I let them go. I let them, go ride their bike and figure out how to take the training wheels off. I let my daughter, make decisions. And I feel like if you are parenting too aggressively, it turns horrible. I've seen it happen. There's obviously a fine line there, but
I taught my daughter boundaries.
yes, that's what I was going to say. Just like the communication. I mean, there's just so much right now that is not being taught to our kids that could protect them versus, hey, it's okay to be whatever fucking gender you want, right? That's disgusting to me. In my opinion, there's going to be a major epidemic of people doing very bad things to children due to the fact that we are letting people think they are something that they're not. And I happen to believe that deeply. And
well, I think for me, with my daughter, and one thing that I can tell parents and that I can tell moms and dads is, if your child is uncomfortable around somebody, don't force them to be around that person.
Simple.
I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand why you allow, like, you force your child to hug and kiss somebody if they're not willing to do it. You're teaching them that it's okay if somebody is forcing themselves upon them.
Yeah.
And so it's boundaries. My daughter always knew, you don't like somebody? Well, first you got to give me a reason, because you can't just say,
I don't like somebody.
No, they make me feel uncomfortable. Okay, how do they make you feel uncomfortable? And when she would tell me, I'm like, okay, like, that's it.
That process of mirroring with your kids is very important. Oh, well, they don't make me comfortable. Well, how do they make you uncomfortable, right? And you say that back to them. Now they're really thinking about, like, all right, I got to tell mom right now. Not just, instead of, if you didn't mirror them, you're just like, okay, they might hold some shit back. But when you mirror them, it's very, 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 it's a very good tool in every avenue of parenting to marry your kids, because after they say something, it's in and out of their head a lot faster than an adult is. By using that process of, why do they make you uncomfortable? Now they're thinking, oh my gosh, there's going to be an answer required here. And they're probably not going to lie in that situation. You're going to get some really good feedback. And
I always told her as well, like, don't lie to me. Like, don't do it. And that's the 4 times in her life that she's ever been disciplined.
Yeah.
Is when she lied to me. Because I would tell her,
I got you.
if you tell me the truth, I promise it won't be as bad. And I've kept that promise to her, so that she will come to me and give me conversation, right? Like, she will come and say, hey, this isn't right. And her dad's law enforcement. Her uncle was law enforcement. At 8 years old, she was out using a gun. Yep. Learning how and training how to use a gun. Mm-hmm. And I'm completely okay with that. She's tiny. She's a small girl. She can be picked up very easily.
Yep.
So the fact that she knows how to use a weapon, I wish that the law would change, that she could be 18 and carry a pistol.
You can go to war.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish she could carry it, because she would be carrying it everywhere with her.
Yeah.
Because she knows how to use it, and she knows how to use it safely. And I mean, I couldn't imagine if I had a gun when I was 10.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the sad part is that could have gone 2 ways, because of just the lack of belief in your corner, It's just that's sickening. I mean, I would have really, to be honest, it sounds horrible, but like, I wish the story ended that way, because probably the shit's probably still continuing. He's probably still.
And
But you've done such an amazing job being so vulnerable and telling your story, and you've probably helped hundreds and thousands of people by not bottling that up inside of you. And I think
it wasn't easy. It took many years because, again, the support, and that's when we get into the sex trafficking and stuff with the aftercare. The support afterwards just wasn't there, right? It was like, okay, this is done. He's in prison. Let's move on. Nah, we might send you to therapy or we might not.
Because back then it was just like kind of deal with it, right?
And it wasn't until I was 25 that I realized, well, shit, the things that are going on in my life, I mean, maybe it is me, right? Like maybe I need to heal some things. And at 25, I was in the deepest, darkest hole of my life.
I had Alyssa on, Miss former United States, and she had a similar situation happen. Unbelievable woman, super successful, awesome. I was gonna put you guys together because she really wants to help out. And she explained being in this bubble with a zipper, and like, most people grow up and they are allowed to open the zipper up from the inside, and they can let anyone in that they want to be emotional with, sexual with, be friends with, build a relationship with. But once someone takes advantage of that and turns you into their property or takes away your self-esteem, that zipper now goes on the outside. You lose control of who comes in and who comes out. And it was just an amazing analogy, right? And she's like, and the fucking zipper's back inside for me now. So she's done a lot of work. She's an amazing woman. I was so impressed with you.
I think the dissociation was the biggest thing for me, where I learned to disassociate my emotions from things. Because it was easier to not feel.
Yeah.
And so during abuse, and it's a huge thing during abuse, is you try not to be involved in the area, in the moment, in the environment. And so, I mean, there are people that have severe dissociation where they end up at the beach and don't even know how they got there.
Really?
Yeah, it can be very severe. Mine was dissociation of emotions, where it was, I don't want anybody to know how I feel. I don't want anybody to see me. I don't want anybody to, and then if you hurt me, then like I'm just writing you right off. Like there's no
communication, no talking through it. And it can be for the simplest
things. Yeah.
I've experienced that through abandonment. Like I dealt with a lot of abandonment. So like whenever anyone would come into my life, I would never, and I've worked a lot around this obviously now because I have a crew, right? But there was a time with, when I got divorced, and then it was a very short period of time between my father committing suicide, me getting divorced, and then me running a business, right? And if you have that mentality while running a business, it's real hard to oh my God, I can't trust anyone. These people are going to leave me. And then I would never get attached to a woman that maybe deserved it because I was just convinced it was going to end in the same result all the time, right? We can't think that way, and I'll tell you something right now. You're not going to figure out how to fix that by yourself.
Nope, not at all.
Things don't get better over time when you're trying to figure shit out by yourself.
I think I got to a point where just nobody was going to protect me, right? I was the only one that could protect myself. Mm-hmm. And I was going to do that. Like I was going to protect myself. Nobody could protect me. And so I wouldn't get vulnerable, right? I wouldn't with friends, family, relationships. Like, nope, I'm going to protect myself at all costs because nobody was there to do it for me when I was 13. It's you go back to the age of your trauma, right? Like, that's where you're developmentally stunted. And there are amazing therapy treatments that help do those that aren't covered by insurance, that aren't covered by the VA, to help with those situations.
And I can tell you that you can DM this young lady right here, and she will 100% stop what she's doing to help you with that.
Yes, 100%.
So I want to transition into your foundation,
yes,
and then talk a little bit about Black Flag. I had JJ on here the other day. It was JJ's first podcast, but you would not know that from the podcast. It was a fucking kick-ass podcast. The way I know I have a good podcast is when Christian isn't on his phone over there and he's paying attention and not on Tinder.
Oh, well, I need
You
to
know.
see it. Are you on your phone right
No,
now?
he's not. He's
Okay.
dialed in.
Okay.
Christian is a very honest young man, and JJ did a great job. So you guys will air it right around the same time too. So let's talk about your foundation. Let's talk about why you've decided to do things a little bit differently. You know, most foundations are not as honest in this arena. I've bumped into a few that I've had some major issues with. One in particular that was disgusting, you know. And the reason why you're sitting here right now is because I'm convinced that, you know, you don't need. It's great to see someone that starts a foundation that is in a good place financially, right? Because the person that's not in a good place financially starting a foundation is a big red flag. So talk to us about the foundation, talk about your goals, and then I want to talk about explaining. You can talk about Colton a little bit, and then talk about the direction and you know, how you guys want to make a difference here in Florida to start.
So originally the foundation started with, I was just going to do women's conferences to raise money to provide support services for women who were sexually exploited or sexual abuse. And then JJ with Black Flag and my brother Justin, they own Black Flag together. They do a lot of EP work, security work, and somebody came to them and was like, we really think there's a need in the sex trafficking world for people to come in and do raid and recovery. And so they came to me and said, would this be somewhere you want to go? And I said, let's explore it. And as soon as I started exploring it, I was like, I'm all in. What do we got to do? Mm-hmm. And it is. Okay.
Can I back up? So just so the listeners are aware right now, in the United States, legally, not if you take my child, legally, you're allowed to do intel, which means build a group, figure out what's going on. If there's a brothel somewhere, if there's a child being held against their will or kidnapped, and then you must contact HSI, local PD, or the FBI. After that child is recovered, or children are recovered at that point, then you can help them with the aftercare, which is basically therapy, could be housing, could be adoption, could be, you know,
many different
helping,
things, yeah.
You know, hospitalization that might be, you know, need support from, could be funding, all those things. The gap is the recovery, the raid and recovery. So you know, the guy down the street has a lot of traffic coming out of their house, and, you know, they have 3 kids and they're all men. And that happens, you know, the current process now is you have to wait for current PD or law enforcement to go in and get enough information, which could take a very long time in order to get a warrant to go in there and save these children.
Correct. And by that time, they're either sold somewhere else, they're murdered, or they stay there and start producing children of their own, because obviously there's no protection used to save these 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds from having babies. And so then they're born into sex trafficking, and then the cycle starts all over again. So
the goal here is to put a team together of former military, mm-hmm. Through Black Flag, which I've had the ability to train with about three of the 5 guys. I'm a civilian, you guys know, but
and we're still recruiting.
Still recruiting.
So and reach out to JJ at Black Flag if you're interested in doing raid and recovery.
Military background, highly required,
yes.
Right?
Yeah, we so as I said in the beginning, the law is not caught up with sex crimes. It hasn't caught up with sex trafficking and the amount of it that's in the U.S. And I mean, there's 27 million children worldwide that are taken into sex trafficking every year, or I mean, sorry, that are currently in sex trafficking, and 50,000 of those children are from the U.S. every year. Between the ages of 13 and 17, girls are being recruited online from coercion, just
Oh my God, you're beautiful. Would you like to
yeah,
would you
come
like
out,
to
and then
model?
that's it. Their parents don't see them again
Again.
because they're being trafficked. And usually, Florida has done a fantastic job. Just earlier this year, they did a massive raid of 128 pedophiles and sex traffickers.
Yep.
So we're getting there, but the problem is only law enforcement can do that, because if our guys go in to even under the bounty hunter or the bail bondsman, you have to have a warrant or a jumped bail, right? There is no
But if someone has a warrant or a jump bail,
yeah,
you
jump
can
bail,
go.
you can go, but
It's too much restriction.
right, and most of the individuals that are in sex trafficking, they've never met the cops before.
Yeah.
So they don't have a warrant. They
Yeah,
don't have
it's not like they're out there like
Yeah.
driving around drunk after
Right.
because they don't want to get caught.
Right, 100%. So our mission is, we're going to get these individuals trained. These with Black Flag, they're going to be our pilot group. They're going to be they're going to go out. They're going to be trained.
Okay.
Colton is going to work with the nonprofit, and we're going to build raid and recovery standards, which we're going to go to the legislator, and we're going to require that any organization that wants to do raid and recovery for sex trafficking victims have to meet those standards. And those standards we could then argue with the legislator to change the law, right? To allow us to be able to go in and provide support to law enforcement, which does not have the resources.
So what Nicole's done was basically found a tier 1 operator, 5-year Marine, Scout Sniper Division, the Marines, multiple tours there. Then wanted to do something bigger and went into the Army. They have a saying, Marines make the best Green Berets. And he was an amazing one. Transitioned in, got selected 17 years ago, has been on 2 different teams over the last 17 years. Super high level training through Sephardic grad. And I mean, this guy could pick up a musket from like 1720 or a slingshot, and use any weapon in any country effectively. CQB training has been amazing. CQB guys, for you that don't know, is basically when someone comes into a room, there is a team, and it's an artwork. I just started to do this past year. There could be 3 guys, there could be 2 guys, there could be 10 guys or more, and it's basically the art of clearing a building, a room, a structure, to where everyone on the team is safe and everyone on the other side of the wall is in deep trouble. That could be under light, it could be under low light, or no light with nods. Colton is an expert in those 3 areas. And then the beauty of that too is, Black Flag also has a gentleman named Dan that I got to know real well. And it was funny because Dan's a Sephardic instructor, but from a while back. So it's like this beautiful match they had, 100%. And they had this connection immediately that was like unreal. And Dan, most dudes like Dan that are like that have this fucking ego. And Dan walked up to Colton, and Colton's like, it would have been nice to know that there was a Sephardic instructor here, and the instructors are they're on this catwalk above the teams doing their CQB, and basically telling them the right thing and the wrong thing to do. Dan's like, dude, I haven't been an instructor for like a while, bro. He's like, I'm sure you just graduated the course. Like, we can really work together on this. No ego whatsoever. And like, now they talk like all the time, and it's going to be amazing, because that open line of communication between 2 people coming from the same cloth couldn't have worked out any better, right?
No, it's amazing, and they're going to do amazing things together on both sides, and building these standards.
And I would make a very large suggestion right now based on what I saw last week. if you're up to no good, you better quit real quick because you don't want to be on the other side of that wall when these guys come through.
No, not at all.
It's gonna be the wrath of God.
It is. God, I think I was told God's punisher.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what I was told.
And the thing is too is that these guys also are like sincere big teddy bears. They're loving teddy bears. Think about that. You can't send someone in there that isn't mentally stable either, because you make one mistake, this game's over. This not game, but this situation's over. Someone goes in there and makes a mistake. There can be no mistakes here.
There can't. And we have to also think of the victims, right?
So,
And so we have a gentleman named Drew who's going to help build medical standards for immediate medical care as soon as we rescue these individuals. And then we are going to be working on getting them to temporary aftercare until we can get them placed in permanent aftercare.
Yeah, and Drew sets all the military standards for 20th Group and 7th Green Berets, and he's a PA and works with all new standards, all updated standards, teaching classes. He actually still will deploy with a new group that needs backup. He'll sit on the helo if something goes real bad. He still engages. He's still active, and I'm sure he will want to be a part of this as much as humanly possible. I hold him close to my heart, and he's like really excited about this opportunity too. I think that we should talk real quick about what the needs are of the foundation.
So the needs are, one, we need recruits, right? So we need recruits. We need funds because we are going to have to pay for the training. We're going to have to pay for getting legislation done, attorneys, protections for our teams that are going to go in and do this. And so donations are always accepted. Anyone wanting to donate time as well, whether you're an attorney or medical personnel or anything that can provide us support is fantastic.
Let me tell you why, without going into too much detail, another reason why I'm sitting here. I had the ability to meet one of the former directors of a 3-letter agency at Nicole's event last week. And after hearing Nicole and meeting, and her team didn't even know who the guy was. He was just randomly walking around talking to them, taking temperatures. And after, he's like, well, who's doing what, blah, blah, blah. So I talked to him first, let him kind of know what's going on. Then I introduced him to JJ, and he's actually going to be, he's actually started a company, consulting company that's going to be a requirement in the state of Florida for licensing twice a year through a compliance platform of every hotel, motel in the state of Florida must go through this compliance factor of making sure that there's no trafficking going on inside these hospitals. And immediately he's like, you're my guy, right to JJ. Like, I'll do all your intel. So for this guy of this standard to know of all these other agencies out there and all these other organizations out there, and to be like within a 5-minute conversation, like, you're my guy, like, that holds a lot of credibility. So with that being said, the reason why I'm saying that is I'm blunt. Like, guys, be a part of something big. We all have kids, especially if you have kids and you don't either like share this or send us $1. Like, honestly, kind of shame on you. Like, I'm blunt, right? Like, you guys will go to Starbucks and spend $25 once a day, but you'll overlook the fact that there's a kid being raped inside of a fucking hotel right now while you're drinking your fucking latte. So get involved. And I don't mean to be so aggressive about this. And actually, my 5-year-old daughter has watched this podcast. She's actually sitting behind us right now because, my household is an open book, and I'm not afraid of letting people know that this is a real thing.
I mean, a lot of people look at relativity, right? Like, how's it relative to my life? And there's not a person watching this or a person that's watching TV or out in the street that doesn't know a child in their life.
Yep.
So it is relative. It's a relative to every single human being on this planet. Because what those children are going through and what they're going to have to deal with afterwards is terrible. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I only went into a little detail about what I went through after my abuse and the crippling days where I didn't even want to get out of bed, the days where I felt like, you know what, this is the end for me because my worth is nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've done a really good job. You
It's
know.
by God's grace.
Yeah,
That's
no,
it.
you
Because
crushed it.
this is where he wanted me to be.
So guys, there's going to be a link below. Also, if you guys also just want to get involved and like show up to an event and help out, or come and watch some of the guys train sometimes. You know, it's gonna be an amazing thing. We'll probably do some really cool stuff to where we have some a VIP shoots to where you'll get to train with
Yes.
Colton and their teams, and when you
You
come
can
and
observe any of the training.
yeah, when you come and do that as a donor, there's a Anvil, a cachet. Paul collects the brass for us, and then they build these really cool coins. Check out Paul at Anvil. He's an amazing cat, and we're doing some really good stuff. So any ideas you have, please DM me, Nicole. It'll all be on there. And don't overlook these amazing messages that were delivered today. You know, it's not, oh wow, that was really sad, and go about your day, because you know that's not an effective human.
Not at all.
So thank you. I love you.
Thank you. Love you too, Sid.